They say in my business, fix a ticket, make a friend for life. And welcome to the club, kid. I've delivered a few myself. Last month, we marked the 6th anniversary of September 11th, 2,190 days. I'm from New York. I used to work in New York before the mayor brought me here. And I remember what bin Laden said because I lost a couple of friends. My children lost a couple of parents of their friends. The wind blew over Brooklyn that day for a few days. So they said it'll be 10 years before we know whether our children's lungs are okay. And, but I remember what bin Laden said. He said he's coming back. He said it's going to be 100,000 next time. And it's going to be 100,000 children. And I've been in this business a long time, and he's a man of his word. But what I'm here to talk about today is the fact that we did it for him. Because we've buried nearly 100,000 Americans to murder in the past 6 years. Approaching 50 a day are murdered on the streets of America. Every time I go to a murder scene, I think about the fact that there are 49 other American police chiefs there that night in their city. That to lose nearly 50 a day to murder in the streets of America, to keep bin Laden's promise for him, and the face of that violence is young. Right? In fact, almost always both sides of the gun are the same, young men. Almost always it's one of those 1 million American-made handguns every year that is the instrument of death. And as a father and a patriot, it's hard for me to conceive of the fact that we've become a land that buries our young. One day when I die, my children will bury me. But across this country, we bury our young. And that has become the face of violence in America. And it's extraordinary. Approaching 100,000 of us in the past 6 years. So the story I'd like to tell you about is a story that I told you about the first time. But when I told you the story, what I remembered was, you know, my son's graduating, he's going to Washington, and if this happens. Well, now I can tell you it did happen. My son graduated college, which is remarkable if you knew him. And he went to law school, which is remarkable. And I bought him a bicycle for his graduation because I'm honest. I couldn't afford to buy him a car. And his bicycle was stolen. I used to tell the story if this happened, but it happened. Of course it happened. Bicycle was stolen his first few weeks in Washington. So here's the question. Who do you think was the first call? Who do you think my son called first? Me, Dad. So if even the son of an American police chief doesn't know to call 911 first, how would we expect Americans to? But that's what the American police gave this country a generation ago. We gave America 911. And we told America, your job is to call us and our job is to come. And that simple relationship was going to solve crime in America, was going to stop the killing fields, was going to catch the bicycle thieves, was going to make you better. And that has been the paradigm of American policing now for a generation. We do TV stories about it. We make movies about it. Cops in a car, listening to a radio, rushing across the city, lights and sirens, because someone called us 911. So why is it that even the son of an American police chief, and, you know, I love my kid, he's a pretty good kid, but how is it that he doesn't even know to call 911, and instead would call across a state, call across a country to call dad? And the answer is because crime turns out to be intimate and personal, whether it's the person who's shooting you in your face who you know from your neighborhood, or whether it's a stranger who's stealing your bicycle. It's intimate, it's personal, and you call who you know. And you just don't know the police anymore. We've become strangers in your midst. That's why they make us wear the number on our uniform and the name on our chest. It's by court order that we wear it, so that you know who we are, because we're strangers in your midst. We have become anonymous blue soldiers, we've become centurions, we've become whatever you imagine, because you certainly don't know who we are. And that has been the deal for American policing for a generation. And yet even the son of an American police chief doesn't know the rules. Turns out that most of the crime in the nation is not reported. It's not because they're killing fields like Cambodia where the bodies are hidden, though I'm sure we have some missing bodies. It's because people don't bother to report it to the police. They tell somebody, but they tell people they know. Do you really think the first reaction I had when my son called was to say, good, quickly hang up and call 911 so they can have an accurate crime report? Never entered my mind. And I'm the police chief. Turns out so much of crime is in the home, so much of crime is a fight among friends, it's an argument in a bar, it's not worth the insurance. It turns out we don't report most of the crime in the nation. It turns out that the police have become anonymous and have become strangers. And it turns out that the deal we figured out doesn't seem to be working out as well as we thought it would. Because even when you report it, for the most part, that's where it stops. It's not because you got a good police department or a bad police department, or if you're in Providence, a great police department. It's because most crime doesn't get solved. Hard to solve crime. So there's got to be a better way. There's got to be a different way. It's probably not talking about giving up 911. It's really talking about beyond 911. You know, you learned about firemen and medics, and that's nice. And cops are firemen and medics. We deliver more babies than ambulances do every year. We fight more fires and get hospitalized for more smoke inhalation than firemen do every year. It turns out to see the police as simple enforcers of the law or report takers is really to miss the point of what we spend our time doing. It turns out that people call us for everything. We're sort of the agency of first resort. We're the agency of last resort. People call us for everything, and it's remarkable what they need, but it's even more remarkable what they don't tell us. They call us for everything, but they don't tell us a lot about crime. And that's what we thought we were in the business for. Even Providence, which is the second oldest police department in the nation, a long history and tradition here, they still don't tell us a lot because they don't know us. It was that realization that started a conversation among some of us years ago that gave birth to the idea of community policing, the idea of returning to the neighborhoods, the idea of developing relationships again. To go back to your medic story, could you imagine that you are traumatized physically, you're rushed in an ambulance, some terrible injury, and as you get out of the ambulance and rushed into the emergency room, it's the first time in your life you've met your family doctor? You'd say there's something wrong with that. You're supposed to have a relationship. It's supposed to build over the years. You're supposed to get to know one another. But in American policing, that's how it's supposed to be. We're anonymous and distant, and you don't know who we are until you meet us that day in a crisis, and then you know our number, if we haven't switched it on it. And our name if we happen to be wearing our name tag that day, or if we're playing a game by wearing our partners that day. And that's it. And it's a one-way relationship. You talk and we receive, and then we give you a call if we can sometime later. And America's accepted that. We're in the midst in our business of a quiet revolution where we're really changing the way we do business, where we are thinking about becoming a different type of police force, not abandoning 911. We still answer that phone. We still got lots of police cars. But a department now that has moved into the neighborhoods of the community, that has become part of the community again, instead of prodding itself in being apart from it. That if you walk our streets and you go into restaurants and stores and anybody around this city, there's a pretty good chance you're going to see a police officer's business card taped to the cash register or on the back pegboard with the officer's cell phone, because you're beginning to know who we are again. That the face of the Providence Police Department, as my wife says, thank God is not this one, but is the officers in the neighborhoods again. Crime's down 5 years in a row in Providence. Only city in New England, only one of a handful of cities in the nation. We will bury less children in the last few years than we have in a generation in this city. Crime is down to what it was in the 1970s here. Crime is up in New England. Crime is up in America. Crime is up in Rhode Island. Crime is just down in Providence. We don't have more cops. A couple things happened. We have an honest mayor. I should say that again. We have an honest mayor. And police chiefs who think they are rock stars are really somewhat immature. The reality is a chief is as good as a mayor lets him be. And this mayor, David Cicilline, who recruited me from New York, did a remarkable thing. He gave the police department back to the people. It's a people's police force again, when it was a king's army for a generation, and in most cities is a king's army. So we've moved back into the neighborhoods, and we have begun to develop relationships again, where people trust us. If you go to a homicide scene, and I'm accompanied here by two of my colleagues, Major Paul Fitzgerald, who's the chief of patrol, which means everyone in uniform, including the officer standing out front in the rain this morning, worked for him. And Major Steve Campbell, the chief of detectives, which means everyone in plain clothes, from the detectives you see to the undercover narcs you don't, work for him. And by the way, happy to tell you, as best as we can determine, no one in this room has a warrant. But if you go to a murder scene in the middle of the night, like these gentlemen always do, and you watch and I'll be standing watching, you see something interesting happening. You see cell phones going off. And the cell phones going off of the patrolmen, because people in the neighborhood are calling their cop and telling them what they know. And you see the patrolmen whispering in the ears of the detectives. Or you see detectives saying, you know what? Who's the local cop in the beat? Oh yeah, get him back here. Let him poke around a little bit, talk to his people. Because you don't have to know the uniform, you don't have to love the uniform, you just have to know and love the person in it. And that's where we're going. So that one day, I hope, we return to the world of my father, who was a doctor in New York, an old-time GP, who did house calls and was a better man than me. And I loved him terribly. And if someone said in my neighborhood, who's your family doctor, that was a pretty normal question. If someone even said, who's your family pastor? One day, I hope to honor my father, that people will be able to say, who's your family cop? And that will resonate with people. And that people will have that relationship again, that the next time my son has his bicycle stolen, he will call me as the second call and say, oh, I already called Joe, my neighborhood cop. I let him know what was going on. I just want to let you know, too. The day that happens is the day I believe American policing will have really evolved to where we hope to take it. Thank you.